And now to kick off the second edition of THiNK, I'd like to invite a man who sits like a ball of fusion energy at the heart of Tehelka, like that mythical Greek king that conjures up labors for Hercules. Tarun is not just one of the most iconic editors and writers in the country, he's also quintessentially a man of ideas. And his ideas are always big and bigger. And so I'd like to invite him on stage to share his vision for THiNK and how it came about. We have 75 speakers from across the world, 10 performances, 25 artists who've painted for us under the idea of Challenge of Liberty, and we have an expected 2,000 guests. We hope you enjoy the experience. It's how he wanted it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tarun Tejpal.
प्रेसिडेंट गवर्नमेंट के मनारा पिया बेरोजगारी चिकनगुनिया मक्का वस्ट रसोदहा आंदोलन पार्टी मका किया रफ्तार खान भाई प्रेसिडेंट करके काम में भाई मानिस में करता दूंगा चमकेंगे ड्रिंकिंग वाटर देश के नाधुई चासी शानदार रेलवे स्टेशन दबना जाएगा तो हासिलपुर से दिल्ली हासिलपुर से दुबई से सिंगापुर एयरपोर्ट हुआ दूंगा
Stop buying the lies, the hype, the spin. The truth is crucial. Engage with the truth. Subscribe to the truth.
That was the sales pitch for Tehelka. It's an incredibly exciting and terrifying thing to see so many people of my class here early in the morning. The expectations are obviously great. You know, when we first came up with this idea of creating an ideas forum, the basic driving need was to create a space which actually celebrates ideas beyond just the excitements of cricket and cinema. We've become a society increasingly obsessed with just two things, it seems, and of course politics, cricket and cinema. And there hasn't been a great society or civilization in the history of mankind that has existed without having great ideas and great thought at its core. When we were a great civilization, and we are not today in many ways, when we were a great civilization, what underpinned us was these great ideas, the great ideas that we still draw from, the great ideas that thinkers, even today, not just in India, but across the world, draw from. So the idea was to create a kind of plural forum, a forum which celebrated disciplines as varied as architecture, astronomy, design, social activism, all kinds of different disciplines that we could discuss, hear about, and get the best sort of minds who are operating at the frontiers of these disciplines to come and share things with us. We ourselves, collectively, are legatees to probably one of the greatest ideas of modern times, which is the idea of India. You know, the idea of India, the idea that you could take a subcontinent which was 90% illiterate, that had been colonized for 250 years, that had been a feudal space for almost 1,000 years, that was racked by illiteracy, great poverty. We had no manufacturing when we became independent. Our GDP was less than 1%. The idea that you could take a place like this and pretty much catapult it into modernity is one of the greatest ideas of modern times. I actually believe that in the last 1,000 years, as a collective idea, as a mass idea, there has been no greater idea than the idea of India. This was a subcontinent that was divided along lines of caste, religion, ethnicity, language, in a thousand different ways. But the founding fathers, in the most extraordinary act of the imagination, and the act of the imagination came from really having a great sense of the world, a great sense of their own history, a great sense of what the future of man was. They created a country that today I think represents the idea of the melting pot better than any other country. I mean, I often say that in a sense, India is a template of what the world will become. Our success and failure as a nation or as a society will pretty much determine whether the world can succeed or not succeed as a melting pot. We are, in a sense, the most complex country in the world. Most of us often forget that because we are also divided by class, among other things. One of the things we try to do, I think, is get that class division, get a lot of us to leap across that class division and enter states of mind and states of being that even we who live in India often miss out on, even though there are 700 to 900 million people who live in a class different from most of us here. The Republic of Free Men has no validity unless it's also the Republic of Free Ideas. And that's what India celebrated. It gives me some concern that in the recent past, we've been moving away from it. You know, I mean, I was reading recently, there was a big brouhaha about a cartoonist who had been arrested for some cartoons which had been inimical to the current government. And it was appalling to see that happen because our origins as a nation, as a modern nation, lie with men like Nehru and Gandhi and Azad and Patel, men who were incredibly liberal, who were actually internationalists in everything they saw. In fact, I found a quote from Nehru. In 1951, this cartoonist was arrested under something called the Sedition Act because he'd done a kind of parody of the national flag. In 1959, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, and in many senses, pretty much the soul and architect of what we are as a people today, in 1951, Nehru had made a call to abolish the Sedition Act. So we were more modern in many ways when we became independent in the 1950s and 60s than we are today. I mean, our scientific temper, our rationalist temper was far greater. Today, in fact, there has been a bit of a slide back into old kind of gimcrackisms, but it was not true. And very often when I look at our own story, at the story of India, I feel that, and I'll tell you what it leads to. Today, as I speak, there is this sense of great confusion and chaos in India. We've been through two very, very noisy years, and those are still going on. The noise is, in fact, growing. And across the board, when I meet people, obviously mostly from my own class, which is the elite of India, I always get this sense of dismay. There is great dismay today about what's happening to India. And that, again, is, I would say, a kind of a sense of failure of contemporary India's elite, because if we think deeply, and this has been one of the problems, that even though we keep getting gushy about, you know, as I said, cinema and cricket, we don't celebrate thought and writing anymore, thought and ideas anymore. If we think deeply about it, what we are seeing happening today is actually alarming only in a very narrow sense. And I have to say, I was forced to think hard about it because I was on a book tour in the West just a few weeks ago, and at every place I was asked these questions about India and the chaos in India right now. And because I began to think hard about what was actually happening, were we coming apart? Were we a failed idea? Was democracy a bad idea in India? Were we not meant to be the kind of free liberal democracy that we'd become? Were we stitched together in the most impossible way and the stitching was beginning to come apart? Actually, I found that none of this was true. What was happening is exactly what the Founding Fathers would have dreamed of 60 years ago. When the Founding Fathers tried to create the idea of India, they dreamt up a society that was egalitarian, a society that was based on ideas of equity and justice. I mean, these were the great plinths, ideas of compassion and tolerance. These were the great plinths on which the idea of India was based. I often say that when I visit America, I say the American dream is about the pursuit of happiness and wealth. The Indian dream is not that. The Indian dream is built on the ideas of tolerance, inclusiveness, compassion. And you have to understand that in 1950, when the Constituent Assembly had finished crafting the Constitution and we had adopted it in 26 November 49 and formally on 26 January 1950, when it adopted this great Constitution, arguably the greatest public document in the world, created out of 2 years and 9 months of arguments among some of the most brilliant men of their time. When we had adopted this, we did something spectacular, which nobody had ever done before in the world. We gave universal adult franchise to everybody in this country. That means whether you were rich, poor, illiterate, irrespective of caste, religion, ethnicity, the Founding Fathers believed that all men were equal. In a far deeper sense than the American Founding Fathers and the French Founding Fathers had. And what they did was they gave each of us an equal vote. It didn't matter whether you were illiterate and lived on 2 rupees a day, or whether you were the richest man in India and you'd been to Harvard twice over, you had the same unit of worth within the free society that these people created. There were a series of legislations that they enacted between 1946 and the end of 46 when the Constituent Assembly was created, and let's say around 1956 when the Hindu Marriage Act comes in, a series of legislations, and every single legislation that was created, every single document that was written had only one purpose, and that purpose was the upliftment of the weak, the oppressed, and the poor. I mean, that is truly extraordinary. So we rest, all of us rest, on the plinth of just remarkable men and remarkable ideas. To not celebrate where we belong is a problem. What we are seeing today, this great noise and this great dissent, is the final going down all the way of the idea of entitlement. For too many centuries in this part of the world and most parts of the world, the idea of entitlement has only belonged to the elite. That only we as the elite have an entitlement. Today what you are seeing, the crisis in what we call the Maoist Naxalite areas, the groups of people agitating against the nuclear plant in Kudakulam, the 50,000 tribals and landless who carried out a march for 30 days to come to Delhi in solidarity with the demand for new land laws. All this that you see all across, this great noise, the anti-corruption movements, all this great noise is the final chapter, in a sense, of the trickling down of that sense of entitlement. In other words, even the worst, the weakest, the poorest, the most illiterate of us today in this country have begun to believe that a part of this country is owed to us, a part of this country is ours. And I think if I was one of the founding fathers, I would be filled with a great sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. The upsurge of the Dalits, the voice of the tribals, the voice of the marginalized, the fact that it's out there creating what Naipaul in his famous phrase said, 1 million mutinies, that is actually a triumph. That's a triumph of the founding of India. This is historically a phase we have to go through. As we go through it, it can seem extremely dire and alarming. But I can tell you, if all goes well, in the next 10, 15 years, we will arrive at a far more egalitarian space, which in a sense is what we set out to do, a far more egalitarian space.